type called back-to-back. They're about 3 to 4 meters in size, 3 meters by 4 meters. And we can see industrial buildings located about a canal, which you can see in blue, and the wharf that is stretched around it in the light brown color. Additionally, we can see a chapel, St. Augustine's, with RC listed on it. This indicates it's a Roman Catholic chapel, and so it's likely to serve a local population who is not actually English, more likely Irish. You might ask, how can I know that? Well, again, let's use the map in order to find other clues. For example, house sizes. House sizes are a reflection of demand for land and the nature of the local labour market. Plus, as jobs in the district on the screen were low skilled, for instance tied to the timber yards and coal wharfs about the canal, they were therefore low paid. And again, Britain in the 19th century was a low wage economy. And as people at that time lived close to sources of employment, and knowing that many Irish migrants came to England from 1845 and experienced chronic poverty, such persons had little choice but to live in the cheapest, worst houses, back-to-backs. In short, this area on the screen was not lived in by people by their own choice. This was simply a place where they had to go in order to survive. With industry close by, the entire area on the map would have been noisy, dirty, and full of activity at all hours of the day. Dirt, mixed with high population densities, especially people of low socioeconomic standing, means high rates of disease, and so in turn, low life expectancy. Statistically, average life expectancy in 1849 in a place such as the one on the screen was about 20 years of age. And infant mortality would be such that about 25% of children would not reach their first birthday. Significantly, evidence that the area was unclean can be seen in another way, and let me briefly explain that. Because in 1848, the first national public health law was passed in England. And as an outcome of knowing what the law was and how it affected the structure of urban environments, we can identify on the map the potential dates when houses were constructed. The 1848 Public Health Act, to be very brief, promoted the idea of having light, air and space about buildings. It was a legal response to the understanding at the time that miasma, bad air, caused disease. Therefore, armed with this data, we can view that the houses at the top and right of the picture in purple have extensions at the back. These extensions are basic kitchen facilities, or I won't quite say toilets, but some kind of toilet facility. Something that was lacking in a back-to-back house. And because of the increased size of these newer houses, their rental costs were higher. Therefore, they were unaffordable to the very poorest, unless they were sublet. So all in all, law has been applied in Manchester to help environmentally uplift the area presented on the screen, an area summarised by dirt, disease, deprivation and death. The proximity of death was commonest in areas such as these, not only because of rampant disease, but also because the poor lived in properties often bordered overcrowded cemeteries, which you can see in the black box on the map. And so to conclude, in the study of history, maps, as is true of other primary sources, can be utilised to aid inquiry and learning. And I would say with maps, the key is about having confidence in using them. There's a lot of information that can be acquired, so please don't be afraid of what they show. They can look complicated or strange, but if you take the time to analyse, there's a lot of data that can be gathered from them. John Tosh in the book Historians on History discussed, being able to use sources and being able to obtain evidence from them is a fundamental to being a bona fide historian. Given to reference E.H. Carr in the classic book, What is History? The function of the historian is to master and understand the past. Obviously, it's critical to know how to approach it. If we don't know how to approach the past properly, then quite simply, how can we learn the truth of the past? After all, the truth and a truth are not necessarily the same. In historical study, the truth is knowing really what happened. A truth is a sugar-coated bias, a fiction that masquerades as a reality. And with respect to urban environmental layouts, please consider how you know, and as I say, understand the past next time a historic building near where you live or work gets bulldozed. The bottom line is, if we don't understand our cities and their form in the past, and in essence the need to maintain remnants, physical remnants of them, then as I've indicated, it is problematic to not only understand what civilization once was, but now what it has become. More so, if history is really a futurology, then to know the past means we will be clueless as to the future direction of our society. This is not just a worry, this is a real, important social danger. So I should end by saying thank you, or salamat po, and many thanks for your time, and many thanks for your attention. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here with you. Well, so my talk this evening is on paleography, transmission, and translation, looking into Spanish documents. And after listening to our speakers with their specific researches and specializations, I will now be delving into the practice itself of understanding documents, especially the primary sources, our bread and butter when we do research in the archives or in the libraries. Well, I would like to begin this with special thanks to my first interest in paleography started many years ago as an undergraduate student at UP Diliman, where I met Father Jose Arcilla, and my conversations with him through the years as a student, even until I became a professional, and later on as a graduate student in Spain, where we would meet and talk about books and libraries and documents. So until one day, well, just to end it, to start off with the humor, he thought that I've all these years I was a student here at the Ateneo, and when I told him no, I was a student at the university at UP, and he said, so you were an outsider when I first met you. Yes, I was an outsider when you first met me. Well, what is paleography? Well, it is unfortunate that as a field or as a course here in the Philippines, there is no such thing as a field that actually offers a degree in paleography. But it is simply a field that is widely used by students of history in understanding primary sources. And I would like to here in our definition of what is paleography, it means, in the strict sense, the study of ancient handwriting, and its basic objects are these: first, to read ancient texts with accuracy; secondly, to date and localize their handwriting. As such, it is a major component of two other more complex disciplines: of diplomatic, which is actually the study of documents, manuscripts, which studies all aspects of documents and records; and of paleography, in the wider sense, which studies all aspects of books produced by hand or manuscripts. Well, we are all familiar with this particular book, the Doctrina Christiana, which was the first book ever to be published in the Philippines. Well, wherein it would be also the first book wherein our ancient writing, the Baybayin, would be printed for the first time using Western techniques of printing. And as you will see from the pages of the book, that even in the study of the vocabulary, wherein our language would be Latinized at the same time, and also in the teaching of our prayers. Okay? The Spaniards basically used whatever they could in Latinizing the ancient language, putting it into writing, and then putting it into print. Now, also, if you look at this particular table that was prepared by Javellana, he combines all the different languages, or written languages of different forms of baybayin that were located throughout the Philippines. Well, if you look at our history, when it comes to such a thing as the history of paleography in the country, you will see that, well, although they were not what you might call referred to as the common written language throughout the islands, okay, they were found all throughout the various groups, throughout the archipelago. Well, since I'm here to talk about paleography and of course in relating, okay, the basic tools of research, okay, well, one thing I do see as a problem for our present students today, our present generation, first of all, is the reading knowledge of Spanish. Okay? Well, we do understand that as one of the official languages of the country, Spanish was unfortunately removed, no, as one of the official languages in 1988, leaving us thus with English and Filipino, okay, which in many ways became what you might call a problem, you know, especially for future researchers who will be doing research in the libraries. Well, there was a time when, as an undergraduate student in history, we had to take 2 years of Spanish at the set, and also beyond that, we had to take a certain number of units in translation. Now, well, at the same time, if you look at the history of our documents, the millions of documents located in the National Archives of the Philippines, okay, numbering to around 13 million of them, are all written in Spanish. And many of them, millions of them, are still lying there waiting to be discovered and waiting to be used. Okay. As a graduate student at Salamanca, I remember years ago that as I was doing my first research for my degree in archival management and documentation, a co-researcher of mine at the archives of the Civil War, okay, that Civil War Spain, okay, was doing research on the history of the civil guard in the Philippines, the Valley Civil, and he would always tell me to look into some documents that are found in one section of the archives of the Civil War that were on the issue of Freemasonry. And well, unfortunately, I never got to open them nor touch them actually because I didn't have time to do so. But I was so interested in one particular personality who studied in Salamanca at the time, and I presented that paper for one of my classes during the centennial of the Philippine Republic in 1998, and that was on Pedro Paterno. And unfortunately, I never got to open that particular bundle. Well, a working knowledge of Spanish might seem an obvious part of one's archival toolkit, but I've since learned that quite a few researchers make do with relatively minor reading ability. Well, the historians, Peter Schurz, for example, began his graduate research on Limasawa and Caraga, armed only with his knowledge of Latin, French, and Italian, with his lucky combination of great intellect and extensive historical knowledge. He worked past his limitation to learn both Spanish and Portuguese on the job, but most of us are not so blessed. Okay? Well, since we've lost this language ever since it was released in 1988. Well, for those who grew up in the Philippines speaking Philippine language like Tagalog, Spanish will seem a familiar enough language, leading to the belief that one is able to read and understand it, as I believe as well. Certainly every Spanish word or phrase mentioned will be comprehensible to most Filipinos, and at some level, we can get away with relying on instinct. Well, there are thousands of Spanish words in the various Filipino, okay, in general, and in many ways, okay, due to Hispanism, many of them have gone down through history already developing a different form of meaning. And in Spain, whenever I would say, for example, that we ate mamon and we ate puto, or the Spanish would be aghast because mamon is not a good word. Okay? To be called a mamon is to be called like an idiot. While to be called puto, of course, is the opposite of the feminine version of the word puto. Okay? But I tell them that we eat this, okay, and that is now, well, another problem related to research is the unfamiliar abbreviations of Spanish and Latin, okay, in archaic and contemporary archaic terms, contemporary, that abound in the documents. Well, later on I will show you documents that I've seen through the years, okay, that I've done, that I've been dealing with documents, and my experience starts in Spain after my graduate studies when I was part of a restoration team restoring monastic archives in 5 monasteries in the northern part of Spain, Trappist monasteries. Okay? And that was my first, what you might call, first experience in dealing with paleography, okay, actively, and of course with the use of Latin and other archaic Spanish words that were still developing at the time. It was actually very hard to, really a very hard task to do. Then, of course, okay, another problem that researchers would face here in the Philippines would be translation from the original text. Well, at the moment, I am part of a commission for the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, dealing with a controversy that we hope that would end, and that is the first mass. Okay? And I'm dealing now with documents as their so-called paleographer in the group with a team of translators, Italian, French, and Spanish. Okay, we are reinvestigating the case again, and hopefully the final decision will be coming out, okay, and put an end to this particular issue. But again, it is also a matter of dealing with documents, okay, because of, well, okay, if you know Pigafetta, it would start with Pigafetta, and of course it would end also with Pigafetta's version of the discovery of the, well, together with Ferdinand Magallanes, the discovery of the Philippines, whether they landed in Limasawa, while others would say they landed at Butuan. Okay? And another problem that researchers would be facing in the Philippines would be the deterioration of documents. Well, one of the things that paleographers, well, students of history, okay, like you and I, okay, are interested in, especially in dealing with primary sources, would be first, like, whether these documents exist, and second, whether these documents will continue to exist, okay, especially in. Especially now, okay, we all know that the National Archives is still looking for a permanent home in the country, and the National Archives are moving around, okay, and it is unfortunate that researchers here and also from abroad are not able to use it properly, okay? And that is one thing that we hope that will be resolved in the very near future. Well, dealing with documents such as this that I recently looked into, okay, and of course this is in a very good state of preservation at the National Archives of the Philippines. This is actually a list of, from 1883, of forced laborers called the people polo, okay, eligible taxpayers in a barangay in the town called Cabugao in Ilocos Sur. Okay? And also the age and profession of each polista are also shown. Well, in this particular case, okay, where you have the handwriting still very clear and the documents still in what you might call good condition, okay, even a person who may not understand Spanish would still be able to transcribe it. Okay? Well, because paleography deals with transcription, okay, transfer of from the original from the so-called old handwriting to a more understandable form of writing, and then later on we will have the translation. Another document that I was just looking into, together with the other one, is this. It's actually first part of a series of pages of documents regarding the ownership of property that has been translated originally from Baybayin into Spanish. Okay, and if you are to look clearly, you will see the names of Don Basanta, who was an Indian from the north, and he was dealing with a certain person by the name of Don Agustin Ambrosio, okay, a native, okay, member of the Principalia, who was interested in buying this property. Again, the paper with somewhat with marks on top and on, well, except for that and the marking of the National Archives, well, still the handwriting is still very visible. Now, except for this, okay, which is a map, okay, showing a part of the province of Ilocos Sur, okay, which shows the territories where the Indians and the Igorots would be located. Okay. And also, it indicates also the towns which are Christian, Indian, and Igorot converts. Well, you will see already that, well, although paleography may not be needed except in the reading of the legends and also the description, well, you already see here an iteration that will be very common in our documents. Well, we have to know that, well, we do understand that we are in a tropical climate wherein our documents have to be placed in a very, a very careful area where humidity is controlled. And of course, for most archives and for most libraries, this is something very expensive. And one major problem of archives are basically the budget, the funding. And in a recent talk that I gave to some 60 parochial archivists at the Diocese of Lipa a month ago, and we saw basically the state of their various baptismal records. Okay, well, it is not just what you might call a unique problem, okay, even in the small archives throughout the country, because we are dealing with archives with no budget or little budget at all, no space, no air conditioning, nothing at all. We simply have the documents placed on the table and wherever they could be found. Okay, and not even the parochial archivists are trained to not just preserve them but also to catalog them properly. Okay. So this is something that is quite common throughout many towns and provinces throughout the country. Now, if you are looking for archival places to do research or to look for primary sources, I've listed down here the various places that are considered to be the best places where you can do not just research but also to look for primary resources. Of course, the first one is the Philippine National Archives. Okay? And we have what you call the document section, the Spanish document section, okay, which has practically the billions that I mentioned earlier, okay, of documents from the elecciones, okay, the census, okay, the population, and like the affidavits, okay. Even, for example, the last documents that I looked into a few weeks ago were documents or affidavits of victims of the 1880 earthquake of Manila. Okay? And when it comes to the history of disaster, these documents also would become very important because it talks about basically how people reacted, okay, to the earthquake of 1880. Well, followed by the Dominican Archives at the Universidad de San Juan University of Santo Tomas. Okay, and another very good archive which many people actually are not knowledgeable that it exists would be the Dominican Archives at San Juan inside the campus of Aquinas School. Okay? And if you are familiar with the history of the 80s, when the Dominicans, okay, well, there was a, what I would say, a revolt of Filipino Dominicans, okay, where the province would be divided between the Philippine province and the Spanish province. The Dominican archives in San Juan is handled by the Spanish province of the Order of Preachers. And it has, although it is small, but it has a very good collection of missionary activities from as far as the Batanes and up to in the northern territories where the Dominicans did their missionary work, even up to the Cordilleras. Then you have the Ayala Museum and Library at Makati, and the Philippine section of the Ateneo de Manila University, and the Lopez Memorial Museum, okay, which is now undergoing some changes because it's making its transfer to Pasay now, okay. So the Lopez Museum now is closed, and the Ortigas Library at Pasay. Okay. Now, I think hopefully in the future there will be what we might call like a guidebook prepared for other archives that are found in private collections. Okay, just like in Spain, in Madrid, the Fundación Tavera, Historical Tavera, came out with a very good guidebook, a guide to manuscripts and collections on Filipiniana in private libraries, and around 35 private collections in Madrid alone were holding Filipiniana materials. Well, many of them actually were taken from the end of the Spanish colonial regime and taken back to Spain, okay, where they still remain up to the present. Some people would say it's better there because the climate is good, instead of bringing back here where the climate is not so comfortable. No? That it will not make the documents quite comfortable in their stay here in the country. Now, in terms of writing and language, okay, one thing that I've seen in the various documents in archives here in the Philippines, just in the Philippines alone, will be in the various handwriting used by the scribes or those who recorded from the 16th all the way up to the 19th century. And I've recorded 3 to 4 of them, okay, which were quite common in all the documents. Some of them actually overlapping to the various centuries. Okay, one would be which was very, very prominent during the 16th and the early part of the 17th century, which is the Italica, okay? And, when paleographers or, students of history, researchers would look into documents like this, they would have to deal with the handwriting of a particular century. And, when I first asked my professor in paleography, what would be the best way to deal with this? And the only thing he would say is patience and study. And that is what continual practice of transcribing, okay, from the original, okay, to understanding the various modes and abbreviations used in the interpretation of the alphabet. Now, another form that was very common was the redonda, okay, which again is quite popular during the 16th and the 17th century here in the Philippines. And the pagtesana, which I think would be the hardest in terms of transcribing because of the so-called intricacies of the letters, okay, and of course.